Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth episode of the Building FoodTech podcast. I'm here with my co-host Brad, and we're going to have a lot of interesting conversations today with some of the members of the Freight Farm team, of whom Brad is a founder of. And so I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting conversations from two different perspectives, right? One person who's running kind of the crop development side, and then the other focus more on the business development side. So we'll have a little bit of a somewhat nerdy conversation on one hand, and then on the other side, kind of more of like thinking about like the customer and, you know, what are their needs, where are we finding customers here at Freight Farms, and kind of looking at what the future is. And so a lot of really exciting stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a really exciting day, really exciting episode. You know, we're here at you can probably hear in the background, we are at the Freight Farms HQ in South Boston. We're in the research area, so there are fans going, condensers, you might hear a drill or something. This is real. This is all taped live and then broadcast to you guys. But, it's a real working, startup that has gotten to a certain level here in Boston, which obviously I founded, super proud of. Really excited to have, Dave who on the crop R&D side, Alison on the BD side, kind of two sides of the coin for any company that gets started up, R&D, crop, developing the models for the customers, all of that, and then, how to apply it, where to sell it, how to sell it, all of that. So, we're going to get into some really fun topics about different plants, how to cure disease through growing plants, things like that. Let's get into it. And so, great episode. Really, really excited to be doing this today.
So we're here talking to Dave Harris at Freight Farms. So I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation because, we've been talking about the great work that, Brad's had in founding Freight Farms, working through that entire space. Now we have the guy to be able to go through and discuss it further. So really, just to get to discussion of the individual on a, base level, right? How'd you first get into technology? Where'd you find your start? And, how'd you eventually find yourself here at Freight Farms?
Well, that is a good question. So believe it or not, I learned about Freight Farms through a friend who also worked here for almost 11 years. His name was Dan Marino, and that is a real name.
Yep.
Not the Dan Marino, but the Dan Marino.
Yep.
And Dan, I was living in Boston. I was working in international education, and I had studied biology in school. I didn't use it at the time, but Dan joined Freight Farms and kept telling me about this company growing food inside of shipping containers. And I remember thinking, what? What are you talking about? And over time, he just kept telling me about it and getting me more and more excited about it. And in 2016, there was an opening, and I applied for a job doing customer service here at Freight Farms. At that point, he had won me over. I was really excited about it, and so I actually came to the block party at the original location over there on, not L, what was it?
Summer Street?
Summer Street.
Yeah.
And I remember walking in and seeing the farm for the first time and just having all these ideas, and it was so inspiring. And shortly after that, the job opening happened. I applied and I got a job doing customer service. And then over the years, I worked with a lot of farmers, learned a lot about freight farming, bought a farm myself, ran it with my brother, then sold that farm shortly after COVID happened. And then now I do the crop research and development here at Freight Farms.
Awesome. And so, one of the things, what really you were talking about getting drawn into Freight Farms, right? And how would you describe the mission here at Freight Farms? Because I've heard Brad's version, and I'd love to hear your version and see what was the thing that most drew you to it?
Yeah. So I'd say those are two kind of different questions, because I don't think it was necessarily the mission that really brought me here. The mission I've always agreed with and found to be really altruistic, which is to basically try and give people the ability to grow food anywhere. So maybe that is partially why I came, I guess. but that goal allows us to build technology that empowers people to grow food wherever they are, regardless of the outdoor conditions, and then also to support a lot of people that don't have access to good food. So if you don't have access to good food for whatever reason, maybe you're geographically isolated, or you have, in a lot of cases, you're not geographically isolated. You're right in the middle of it, like, in New York City. There are a lot of places where you can't really get access to fresh food, and Freight Farms made it their mission to make that food available to people by allowing them to grow it right there where they live. So that was the mission, as far as I understand it. And my real draw to it was that there is the combination of technology and agriculture was pretty nascent at the time, right? It was still an upcoming industry, and there were just so many opportunities for development, and it was just so incredibly cool that you could do this stuff with some lights and a bucket of water, and just seeing all of that come together and knowing that the potential was there for basically limitless improvement and development. That's what really, I think, drew me in.
And one of the things that I absolutely love about the startup industry and the fact of being able to just engage with a company at a certain level and then be able to find your way into work if someone recognizes that you're talented, and being able to get in, just like in your case, right? Being interested in something, showing up to an event, and then eventually, growing and being, rising higher within an organization. For like other people who are looking to hey, there's a really cool company, and like to engage with them, especially if it's a younger startup, how would you kind of describe that kind of process, especially to a younger person or someone who maybe is older and is looking to have a career change and work their way into a startup?
Well, I would just tell them to get lucky, But realistically, I think I've talked to a lot of people who've done this. My entry into Freight Farms was pretty straightforward. There was a job opening, I knew about it, I applied, etc. But I think I've heard a lot from other people in startups who have said, basically, I showed up and I said I wanted to work there, right? Like, I believe in what you're doing, I believe in your mission, and I want to work here. And as opposed to, JP Morgan or other, 10,000 person companies, that makes an impression. Right? Like, most of the time startups are under 50 people. So every person that shows up and says, I really want to work here, you're going to leave an impression with somebody. So I would say, go, show up, and really be honest about your intentions and your interest. And you will get, at least in my experience and the people that I've talked to, the response is very positive.
Well, I'm now going to pass the baton over to Brad, so that you guys can have a bit more of a more technical conversation about Freight Farms and some of those things. What is forward-looking, all that good stuff.
No, I mean, thanks for the pass in the background. So, Dave, thanks for joining us today. Very, very much appreciated. In case you guys can't tell, we are on site at Freight Farms here. You can hear condensers whirling, you might hear a drill going, because Freight Farms is a hardware and software company. So hardware is a real thing. Plants need a place to grow that is controlled, and all of those things. So we wanted to keep it real in that respect. So you will hear those things. Really, I mean, since what I wanted to spend time with you, Dave, is allow us to kind of get into let's get excited again, because you started like you said in your journey, customer service, and then you ran a farm, had a business with your brother, now, crop research, development, getting to do all the cool things. Like when I think about you, I think about, other than all the BS that comes along with having a job at a startup that's just trying to figure it out the whole time, the cutting edge of what's happening in crops, that's what matters in the indoor space. So, I wanted to leave it to you of, what crops are you excited about? What's happening in the indoor space that has you, most jazzed? And it doesn't even have to be like specific Freight Farms related.
Sure. It's a big question. I think it might makes sense to start with just like where this industry is today versus where it has been in the past, and just what it means as far as, you know, my work and the work that we do here on the research side has a couple of, you know, primary aims. And the first one, though, is to allow our farmers to do more with less, right? Like we want them to use less inputs, so less energy, less consumables, be that, you know, nutrients or seeds or whatever, and get more product, right? And that I think economic reality is based on basically part of being a startup, right? Is that you are trying to you're trying to make your company profitable, right? So that it can continue to grow and continue to thrive and continue to develop, etc. But also it's kind of a reflection on where the industry is today. Vertical farming and CEA in general, CEA standing for Controlled Environment Agriculture, went through a lot of ups and downs in the last 8 years that I've really been in it. Started out as a little known industry. Nobody really knew what it was, right? It was, if you had a greenhouse, it was a big glass house, right? Or a plastic house. And then suddenly all of this really cool technology started coming out, including freight farms, which was one of the pioneers in the space, especially on the container side. And we kind of went through this huge interest, you know, increase in demand and interest, especially from the funding side. And then there was this absolute trough. A lot of those companies raised a lot of money. They went through that money real fast, and it kind of left a sour taste in the sort of investment community's mouth about a lot of the technology that was coming out. And so now I actually find this kind of inspiring from my perspective, because what it means is we are getting back to our first principles, which is we want our customers to be able to use our product and use it successfully and be profitable at the end of the day. That's what we want to do, and it drives every decision that I do from a day-to-day basis. Obviously, there are sustainability goals that are, you know, in that, but we want people to be able to operate these, because long-term, the impact that we have on sustainability is going to be the greatest if people are able to operate for the longest amount of time.
Right.
So what excites me, I think, is that, you know, finally this industry is really focused on what are the nuts and bolts of making this technology profitable. And we've done away with a lot of the, you know, the bells and whistles and really gotten down to that. And there are some really straightforward ways, such as like make the plants grow faster, right?
Okay.
But then there are a lot of really cool sort of ancillary technologies coming along that are robotics based, that are, you know, basically removing some of the labor component from it, some of that long kind of tedious labor that goes along with this, improving on the quality, all of that, you know, factors in to the bottom line. So I could start really with any of those.
Yeah, so why don't we dive in, because like obviously I want to get into the cool, everybody wants to talk about robotics and all that, but like I want to get boring a little bit for a second.
Let's go.
You know, like what are the, like in your 8 years, like you've seen a lot of different iterations of freight farms itself, the industry itself. You know, in your freight farms journey, like what is the most boring, most impactful, I guess, change that you've seen happen? Like with freight farms specifically, you know, that doesn't involve robotics, doesn't involve, don't you dare say AI. Like, you know, don't you do it. Like real boring baseline. Like what, you know, what is one of those things you look back and you go, yes, like that was impactful, that made a difference.
You know, let's get boring and let's talk about SOPs, because realistically, exactly. But
Love it.
Realistically, having a standard operating procedure, right, where every single step is standardized, every single person is doing the same thing, right, and they are following a very, very clear spec for what they are trying to accomplish, that alone has been probably the single most impactful thing that I have seen.
Okay.
Because we work with, as opposed to a lot of companies that might have, you know, 5 or 10 giant farms, right? And those farms are run by the same people and you're interacting with them. We are a distributed technology of, you know, upwards of 600, almost 700 farms throughout the world. And every single one of those operators is operating our technology slightly differently. And so having a standard operating procedure that says, do it this way, here are your indicators of whether this is successful or whether you're doing this right or not, is incredibly impactful, because it really does ensure that your technology is being used the right way. And being used the way that it is going to be the most successful for the customer using it. I think that honestly has been the biggest one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is boring, and exactly
boring.
the kind of impactful, boring changes and just development that, as you said, you see impact across the board. Now, on the other side of that, like, you know, most let's go boring again, to like most boring to most interesting customer application, because you said like everyone's using the technology, distributed farming in a slightly different way. You've had the privilege to, you know, have one yourself, interact with so many different customers, see how they're doing, because then they all want to know, how can I do it better, how can I get more profitable, all the things. You know, give me the most, since we did boring first, let's do most exciting or most interesting from your perspective, from like, let's say your, you know, from your crop business model lens, like what's the most interesting application you've seen?
Wow. Think on that one for a second. Interesting. I think that could be defined a couple of ways, but I'll start easy by just saying a lot of places that historically have never had access to food that did not come off of a container ship or was flown in by an actual airplane. So these are islands like the Turks and Caicos, or you know, really far off islands, the Faroe Islands, right? Where it's nearly impossible to grow lettuce. I mean, you can grow other things, and sometimes, but even there, even with what you can grow, the space is very limited. Those are some of the coolest things that I see, because it's just amazing that, you know, you go from having no fresh produce available, unless it's like, you know, comes in like a shrink wrapped head, or it comes in like a giant styrofoam box that's been flown around the world, to literally walking in and saying like, oh yeah, I have lettuce. Yeah, I grow it right here, actually, right? Like, and that mind-blowing. So I talked to a chef that we work with, who works in the Turks and Caicos, and he was saying they are mostly producing the produce for their own consumption there at the resort that he works at. But he was saying that once the word got out to the private chefs that he had this stuff, it became this, like, you know, this positive feedback loop where everybody's talking about it. Like, wait a minute, where'd you get this? Like, how did you even? How is it even possible that you have this? Right? Did you get it flown in? Do you know that guy? Right? And he was like, no, we grow it ourselves. So that was really cool to see, and I think it's just it's an easy one, because you know, it's not the application necessarily that's the cool part about it. It's just that you go from having, it's like 0 to 100 real quick, and people have no access to this food, and then suddenly they have access to it, and to just see the creativity explode around, like, what would we do if we had this? And then you finally, you know, you say, oh, we do, so let's go.
So I want to follow up to that, because there was a period of time, and I forget what year it was or whatnot, but there was a point in time where, like, whenever I thought of Dave Harris, it was essentially, where in the world is Dave Harris? Because there was a period of time where we were moving a lot of farms, we were kind of scaling up the company, but we didn't have all those SOPs. You know, we were a young company, we were trying to figure it out, trying to get the airplane to stay in the air, that whole analogy. And it was on a very regular basis coming to the office and be like, where in the world is Dave Harris right now? So on that, what was your favorite Freight Farms onboarding, launching destination? Because like I would look out and be like, oh, he's in the Middle East, oh, he's in France, oh, he's here. And I'm like, oh, that's where Dave is this week.
Man, I would say it's kind of a tie.
Okay.
There's not really just one, but I got to do Egypt and Mauritius in the same trip, and that was really awesome. Got to see one of our customers who has a very large kind of traditional farm in the Nile Delta, and then from there, and they're still operating today, doing awesome,
Yeah.
by the way, and using their farms for research purposes, which is like very close to my heart. And then flew to Mauritius. And
So for those that aren't familiar,
Yeah.
where in the world is Mauritius?
that is a great question. Mauritius is off the coast of Madagascar.
Okay.
And there are very few islands out there. There's Mauritius and then there's Reunion Island.
So I'm going to go a little deeper. For those of us who have only seen the movie Madagascar 1 and 2,
Yep.
where is Madagascar?
Madagascar is off the coast of southern Africa, so it's on the east side. So if you are looking at a map, right, and this is South Africa down here,
Yep.
Madagascar is here, and Mauritius is this tiny little dot right out here.
Yep. Okay.
So that was probably the coolest single trip. I also got to do Jordan and Saudi Arabia.
In this the same trip.
Actually, I think those were separate trips.
Okay.
But equally interesting. There's a school in Jordan that was using a freight farm for educational purposes, and also providing the produce to the dining hall. An amazing, cool place to go, and just seeing how excited everybody was that the farm was coming.
Yep.
And they had painted a mural on the side of it. It was like, it was kind of magical.
Yeah. No, I mean,
So-
I've been I had that in my notes. I wanted to ask Dave that question for a while because of that period of time of where in the world is Dave?
Yeah.
And I'd ask, and they'd be like, everyone would have a different answer. Just
Who
be like,
knows?
well, he was in Egypt, but I think he's in Mauritius. And I'd be like, where's Mauritius? I don't know.
But I've also been to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And I mean, no offense to Oklahoma, but it's not Mauritius, right?
I mean-
So I would say it wasn't all glamorous.
Yeah. No, nothing is. That's why I wanted to ask. And I guess, so that's far flung. What is, I guess, let's go to the other side, like the most mundane application that you've had to onboard or had the pleasure of onboarding.
I had the pleasure. Mundane. I'd say a lot of our customers have a very similar business model.
Okay.
And so, it's each one of them is interesting, and they all have their own brands, and they all have their own sort of approach. But for the most part, if you are a small business farmer, your approach is going to be fairly similar, which is go out, try to drum up some interest in your farm.
Yeah, I mean, they're running a small business.
Exactly.
So it's just like launching your own business, just happen to use Farm in the Box.
And that's not, I mean, it's never cookie cutter because every single one of them is different, right? A small business is never the same as the next one.
Right.
But in a way, there was a playbook for those. So I would say those were pretty straightforward, not mundane necessarily, but, you do a couple of them and you kind of get, this is what you need to know.
It's
right?
kind of like, good news, we have SOPs.
Yes.
The bad news is like,
So-
they're standard, and I'm going to walk you through and use them for what their purpose.
Right, and to your point, we didn't always have SOPs.
Right.
And we haven't had them, I mean, even super recently, we have not had them to the standard that they needed to be for people to really be as successful as they possibly could. And that is a fairly recent development, and that has just been, that's why it was such a mind-blowing thing for me to see how much improvement you could really get. So, all just to say, the SOPs have been a more recent development, but a majorly positive one. Back then, it was very, very bespoke.
Yep.
Like you were saying.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing. Is you got to go through that period and get people who are bought in to get on board because it has to get figured out.
Right.
And so, I think the piece that is the exciting side of what we want to talk about is, okay, so we've got SOPs now that are good enough, and they're built on the backs of, like you said, 2, 3, 4, 6, 800 farmers who have been through and, really put in the work and said, now, you're focused on, crop development, research, changing the game for the next 600, in some ways. So, I'm going to ask 2 questions, but we'll start one at a time. One is going to be around crop development, and then the other side is going to be farm development. So, crop lots, 2 parts. How has the appetite changed from the grower community of hey, what about this? What about this? Because for the longest time, I remember back in the day, I was just trying to prove to people that you could grow anything,
right?
In a box.
Yep.
That is obviously no longer the case. So what do people want you to do? What are the exciting ones where you marry up with I'm hearing you're asking me about this, and that's actually a track that makes sense. I know there's a model there. Let's do it.
Good question. So I think you'd be surprised at how many people there still are out there that don't know that you can just grow anything with hydroponically, right? Or darn near everything.
Okay.
And I think that there's a subset of people that are just super interested in seeing, all right, what do you got growing in here, right? And you show them the wasabi arugula, and you show them the radishes and the turnips, and they're like, can't believe this.
Yep.
This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So I think that still exists, and I think it gets me up in the morning, right? Knowing that people are just super excited to see that this is possible. It feels futuristic. It feels like you're walking on the moon, right? So that still exists. From the, like the crop specific business model standpoint, right? Like what makes sense? What are people more interested in these days? There has been, I think, a shift towards, especially from our small business farmers, they want to grow multiple things at once, right? And I think they've always wanted this to a degree, but monocropping, which you have on an industrial scale, is not always the approach that small business farmers want to take.
Yep.
They want to grow 10 different things in the same container. So they're wondering, like, well, what if I grew basil and arugula, right? Like, how do I make that
Pairing
work,
those,
right? So I think sometimes that's a kind of an interesting kind of conundrum that we often run into, is like, okay, how do these crops grow well in one environment?
So just give me a quick example. Like you're trying to grow basil and you're trying to grow arugula. What's the difference? You turn on the lights, you give them water, you feed them food, and they should grow, right?
Seems like it, right?
Yeah.
So basil is a warm weather crop. It prefers warmer temperatures in order to grow optimally. So you really do have to grow it at a warmer temperature if you really want to get the most out of it.
Yeah.
And then arugula typically is grown at a cooler temperature. So that's probably your biggest bifurcation in terms of crop types in general, is just warm weather versus cool weather. They're both leafy, right? They're harvested during their vegetative stage, so before they actually produce any flowers or anything.
Yep.
So they're very similar in that sense. So they're going to have similar nutritional needs. However, basil also needs more magnesium than your typical crop.
Yep.
So that's one thing where if you're going to grow just basil, you have to make sure that it's getting the right complement of magnesium, not necessarily the same amount that something like lettuce would require.
Got it. So I want to take a little bit of a left turn here, just because you sparked some interest in my brain.
Sure.
But in my current company, we spend all our time in food as medicine, and a big discussion is, can we engineer? Can we make food better from a health perspective? And so, just kind of curious. Obviously, you've been doing R&D on crops. You've seen, hundreds, thousands, probably millions of iterations of different lettuces, arugulas, all these other things. And from a general sort of controlled environment ag perspective, like, is the idea of, creating a high iron lettuce for an iron deficient diet or something like that, is that a reality? Is that something? Are we space age? Are we talking 10 years down the road? Or are we doing? Or are you not telling me that you've got that going behind this wall?
There are definitely applications for that. Recently, I just saw an article. It's funny you say that, about low potassium lettuce being sold in Japan.
Interesting.
So this is a lettuce grown under a very specific nutrient regimen to produce a low potassium product for people that are unable to eat that much potassium, but still like lettuce.
Yep.
Right, and they still want to get their nutrition. And so that is, and they actually do sell it at a premium, interestingly.
Interesting.
So it's got its own packaging. It's pretty interesting. So there's definitely that type of application. On the food as medicine side of things, there's one of my favorite things to cite is UC Davis has a farm, and they grew watercress. This is
just for those who aren't familiar with UC Davis, like, where do they sit in the, I guess, ecosystem of agriculture, plants, all of that?
UC Davis is definitely one of the top ag schools in the country. I'm not sure in the world potentially, but definitely in the United States, they have one of the top ranked ag programs. So it's a really good school for anything ag related. And they, one of their, I believe she was a PhD student at the time, did a side-by-side trial, and this is a public-facing scientific paper that you can go and actually read yourself. And literally all they did differently was that they grew one side of their freight farm with higher blue light and the other side with a lower blue light ratio, basically.
Yep,
right?
sure.
And what they found was that the plants, the watercress that was grown under the higher blue light intensity, was produced more of what's called glucosinolates, which are they're a precursor, I believe, for an anti-cancer compound that once I believe it's actually processed in your body, if I understand it correctly. So they found that the precursor for this anti-cancer compound was higher in the ones grown under the blue light than under the red and blue, and that they were, under these conditions in this controlled environment, able to produce a product that has more anti-cancer potential than under potentially grown in an outdoor environment.
Yeah. I mean, I actually didn't know about that study, so like I wasn't trying to get him to the point of saying freight farms can solve cancer. That's not, no one's saying that. I'm just, I didn't know that's where we were going to go.
We
but that's
are
really
not
fascinating.
saying that.
No, but I think that's,
Yeah.
Well, I think to the point of like, is food is medicine, food is health. Like we all know, you eat better, you feel better, you are more healthy. That's common knowledge. But I think the idea that there's the technology available to do the research to get to a point where people can be growing specific crops for these attributes. Whether it's lower potassium, whether it's curing cancer, what have you. It's really really freaking cool. And so. While I want to keep going on that, I do want to talk to you about the, any realm of hardware, software, that has you excited, sort of like, you're like, I'm really into that, that you're thinking about for the future. And, in any realm, like whether it's crop impact, customer impact, just general impact on controlled environment ag. I'll leave it broad so I can let you pick and choose.
Oh, man. Well, I would say what has me most excited is this sensor technology just keeps getting more ubiquitous, cheaper, and more accurate over time, right? So you can take this custom array of sensors. So you can take humidity, temperature, CO2, etc. These are all things that we've been able to measure in the past, but realistically in the past they were so expensive and they were so large and bulky, it was hard to get enough of them to really get a full picture of what's happening in a grow environment, right?
Yep.
And now, this is definitely not a product placement, but there's a company called Ruvi, which is out of Finland, and they produce these tiny little sensors that are like this big, and they're like $50, and they will measure humidity, temperature, barometric pressure, and movement.
Okay.
And so you could literally put these all over, and you can detect microclimates, and you can say like, okay, well, we need a little more airflow here, or like, actually this place is getting a little bit warmer, so we need to increase our HVAC capacity, right?
Yeah.
So I think that sensor technology has always been something that's it's shown promise from the very beginning, but just the fact that it keeps getting better is really cool, because it allows you to control the environment even more accurately than you ever were before. So I'd say that one got me excited. Same thing with LED technology. They're becoming more efficient. They're putting off more light. You can power them with less energy, which means that a lot of the sustainable energy solutions that were always kind of off the table, right, for us.
Yep.
Solar power, we want to power these things with solar, but it takes so many solar panels to do it.
Right.
But as the energy usage of these LEDs keeps going down, that's making it more and more a reality. And at the same time, solar panels are getting better.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'd say that's exciting. Challenge to anybody listening to this: if you are in the space and you want to solve a problem,
Bring it on.
biggest one I can tell you right now is the sensors that we use to measure the nutrient levels in the water are called EC sensors. It stands for electroconductivity, and they basically measure the conductivity of the water, but they are not specific to the nutrients that are in the water.
It's just the conductivity.
It's just the conductivity. So you can have the reading, which is normally in a number like 1.6 or 1600, and it could be made up of totally the wrong nutrients. So you might say like, oh, well, my set point is right. I mean, it says 1600, but all the nutrients in the water are the wrong ones for the plants. So if you're out there and you're listening, go and create a cheap, available, ion-selective electrode or something that can measure the individual nutrients in the water, and you will be a very rich person.
So I'm going to pull that thread a little bit. Give a little hot tip to all the entrepreneurs out there.
Yep.
So currently in a lab setting, you can measure that.
That's correct.
So what Dave is really asking everyone out there who's ambitious and wants to get into founder mode, and make this happen, is find a way to commercialize that very specific technology you're probably using in your research if you're at UC Davis or one of these other labs, and take that and bring that to market, because there is a market for it. It would help Dave, it would help freight farms, it would help any hydroponic greenhouse, any vertical farm, anybody in the grow space. Safe to say it would be very, very beneficial to commercialize that cancer, that cancer saving lettuce that you mentioned. The only way to make that possible is to get granular and sense nutrients in the water, correct?
It's going to be majorly impactful on most of the sustainability metrics. Exactly.
Got it. Yeah, no, I really just wanted to simplify it, dumb it down, and then bring it back to something that just blows my mind. All right, so we'll wrap it up here. My last one for you. Your favorite thing you've ever grown in a freight farm. Sub-question. Favorite thing you've ever grown in a freight farm to eat. So those can be two separate things.
Well, it turns out they are two separate things.
Okay, good.
Number one, and I had a hand in this. I wasn't the only grower, but it was definitely Pipsqueak, our mini pumpkin, which stuck around for quite a while. And shout out to Nathan, who is our production manager here, and it was really his idea and his baby. And every time we kept coming in, and that pumpkin just kept getting bigger. We were like, "This is not. This can't be real."
Pipsqueak, I love it.
It was Pipsqueak was their name, and then the favorite thing to eat. I'm going to say is something that I'm trying right now, which is this thing called Chinese water spinach, which a lot of times what we end up growing.
Just like fun fact for those listening. So you speak Chinese fluently, correct?
I wouldn't say fluently anymore, but I am definitely, I can have a proficient.
Got it. No, I just always, again, where in the world is Dave, and then just interesting facts about Dave are always one of those things. So please continue.
The Chinese water spinach, though, the reason that I decided to grow it was every time I went to the Chinese restaurant and asked for this specific thing, they would be like, "We're sold out." And I'm like, it's 11 o'clock in the morning. Like, how is this sold out already?
You got here at 7.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how, but it was always sold out. And this is here in Boston. And I know that this is, and it's one of my favorite dishes that I always get. And so I was like, wait a minute, I really want to try this. And now we've got it growing. And it turns out it grows really well hydroponically. So, yeah.
Favorite to grow, favorite to eat. So Pipsqueak the pumpkin. Thanks, Nathan.
Yep.
And what was the name of the crop?
Chinese water spinach, or if you might recognize it as Kongqing Cai.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kongqing Cai.
Kongqing Cai. Yeah. Yeah. It means
I'll work on it.
Empty heart. Green.
Empty heart green.
Yeah,
I love it.
that.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, Dave, fantastic conversation. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. This is awesome.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Thanks, man.
Let me know when you guys got avocados. So, me and Brad here have Alison Rabschnuk at Freight Farms, and just to kind of kick off the conversation here, who are you, Alison, and then also what do you do at Freight Farms?
Great. Well, nice to see you both. Thank you for having me on. I am the Director of Business Development at Freight Farms, so I've been in the role here for about a year and a quarter. And prior to this, I had a quite circuitous path, I think, to where I am today. So started out in very traditional advertising and marketing in San Francisco several decades ago, working on brands like Levi Strauss and Gap and Taco Bell. Eventually got into the digital advertising space and from a sales perspective, and really then found my passion about 8 years ago when I got into the plant-based foods world. So I've been vegetarian and now vegan for a total of about 32 years, and I'm very passionate about not only healthy eating, animal welfare, but also sustainable food systems. So worked in that space in a variety of roles, and then was approached about freight farms. And I think one of the joys for me is not only the impact that the company is providing and the incredible technology and unique technology that you've developed, but it's also that it's in my backyard. First job I've ever actually had in Boston, having worked remotely for about 28 years.
Well, welcome home.
Thank you.
So when you first got approached at Freight Farms, what really spoke to you? Was it based off of the mission? Was it the technology? Like, what piece really spoke to you and drew you in to Freight Farms?
Yeah, I mean, I think just in the work I had done around, trying to solve the many problems within our food system, one of them was always getting food to food deserts, which that really resonates with me. It's quite sad, how, in a place like Boston, we're surrounded by so many different choices and so much fresh food. And then you go out into many parts of our country, and literally there's nothing within a 45-minute drive. So that spoke to me. And then I think the other part is absolutely the sustainability benefits of hydroponic farming, and specifically in the freight farm with the low water usage and aspects like that.
And so when you kind of look at like some of the things with freight farms and new technology, we obviously had a conversation with Dave talking more about the crop side of things, but maybe from more of your perspective is on the BD side, right? What really drives you to the excitement in seeing some forward-looking stuff at freight farms?
So in my role in business development, I attend a lot of trade shows, and given that, and you've already probably touched on this, but our customer base at Freight Farms really ranges from so many different segments, from small business farmers to educational institutions. We have a hospital, we have nonprofits. So there really are so many different use cases. And so we attend trade shows in a lot of those different sectors. And so I'm meeting with a lot of different people. And just the excitement. So we'll be at a trade show and we have this nice backlit banner, but so do a lot of other companies. And people come up to our booth and they say, what do you do? And a lot of times we seem to be maybe a little bit out of place. If it's an education show, they're selling chalkboards and books, and all of a sudden they have a booth with a farm. And people get so excited by the possibilities. And the possibilities, as are just endless. So from the teaching vehicle, the community engagement possibilities, obviously the food supply, the sustainability aspect. That's what's so exciting, is realizing that our technology can really fit so many gaps in curriculum and food supplies, etc. So I think that's what's just so exciting, is seeing the excitement on other people's faces.
I'll pass it on to Brad now to kind of dig more deeper into this.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, just again, caveat, we're here in the R&D heart of Freight Farms in Boston. So it's a working site. So you'll hear fans, you might hear a drill, and we're gonna keep it in the best we can, as long as it's manageable. But wanted to have the conversation because when we started Freight Farms, so many years ago, the idea was, in a lot of ways, anyone could grow food anywhere, and like what will that turn into? What will that mean? What kind of impact that will have? And where I've been spending a lot of my time is thinking, what's the highest sort of societal application of this technology? It sounds broad and grandiose, but it's a good place to think. And I think in your role, wanted to sort of just think about and hear about what are the most, you said all these different segments.
Yeah.
Let's just, let's pick one. Let's pick, the most interesting sort of enterprise application that you've seen.
Sure.
And tell me about it.
Yeah. It's going to be hard to pick one, but I would say I'd probably pick the hospital segment.
Okay.
And it's one that we haven't really penetrated very fully. Okay. So at this point, we have one customer, Advent Health. So this is a hospital chain that is mostly in the southeast, also somewhat in the west.
Okay.
They have, I think, 53 campuses. And about 4 years ago, the VP of nursing at Advent Health in Celebration, Florida, which is in Orlando, really close to Disney, basically came, I think she saw a segment on the news about freight farms.
Okay.
And it just started the wheels turning, right?
Yeah.
As food is medicine, has really gained a lot of traction over the past several years as an initiative. I think that's really what kind of drew her to this idea. And so it took them a little bit to get internal buy-in, because it was a strange concept, right, for a hospital to have their own farm. But she made it happen. And so they actually have it at their Celebration campus out in the parking lot.
Nice.
And the result from just that one farm after the first year or two of running it was a 238% increase in salad bar sales.
Wow.
So you would think, I thought very wrongly that in Florida there's plenty of fresh produce that's grown. And apparently that's not the case. So
Right.
they actually get food from their distributor just like we do.
Yep.
A lot of it arrives dead on arrival. They had a significant amount of food waste, and the quality was really low. So once they actually were able to grow their own produce hundreds of feet from their Celebration Cafe, again, people were so excited. They added 28 hours of salad bar access per week.
Really?
As well. And now they're really starting to see as a community just how much food is important as is medicine, right? So it's not just about prescribing pills, it's about really prescribing and offering really fresh food.
Yeah.
So that's been exciting.
And so the salad bar, you said they added 28 hours on a weekly basis. So is that salad bar, that's for the nurses, for the doctors?
It's for all the staff,
visitors?
and the staff are now thrilled.
Yep.
And it's also for the people visiting the hospital, and they went through the very extensive certification process of getting it approved for patients.
Oh, okay, yep.
Yes. So now patients, who are eating certain diets are able to select a green salad, and it comes from the Freight Farm. So the program has been so successful, they've purchased 2 more. So they now have those 2 in a different location, and the goal is to supply other Advent hospitals that are in that area, with the eventual goal, they've told us, of expanding across all 53 campuses.
Wow. I mean, you give me those numbers, and then you're like, yeah, let's replicate that at every campus.
And there are thousands of hospitals in the United States. There are some very forward-thinking hospitals. Actually, Boston Medical Center started a program a number of years ago where they actually do have a prescription food program. So if you have a certain diagnosis, the doctor can prescribe you literally a prescription to go into their food pantry, and it's all healthy foods, a lot of fresh produce to help. So I think that's for me, I'm hopeful that that's going to be the way of the future.
Yeah, no, I mean, my newest endeavor is neck deep in food as medicine. It's where we live. It's what we focus on. So I was not aware of that particular. I knew Advent Health was a customer. I didn't understand the dynamics. So I'm really glad I asked the question and you answered. Because I think all of the things you said, we're seeing a lot on we're more on the fulfillment, logistics, connecting healthcare to food in a lot of ways. And so there's even more synergies there. I might be spending a little more time on like highest application of Freight Farms might be to make more of these programs happen, which would be fantastic.
We should talk.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're doing. Here we are. Let's chop it up. But no, so I mean, so you've got healthcare. We talked before the episode briefly, and we've had some online conversations. I've been again in that vein of where can the technology that we invented and has been progressed beyond my wildest dreams by Dave and others and so many hardworking people behind this wall making all sorts of noise off air, I think. Where's the highest application of that technology? Kind of like take me back to idealistic Brad in like 2009, being like, what, I want to change the world. In the nonprofit space, we've had some dialogue around family foundations and different initiatives. In that vein, like put on your idealistic hat. Like what are the initiatives? What are the things you've seen or are seeing that you just kind of go, wow, like that's gonna be when that happens, because I'm gonna make it happen. It's gonna just be fantastic. And like, is that thing? What gets you excited in that space?
So one thing I'll mention, this is actually not Freight Farms technology specific, but it is hydroponic technology. Is we had a visit from a team from NASA a few weeks ago. And they are working really hard to basically figure out how to grow fresh food for their astronauts for the Moon to Mars mission, which is supposedly going to take place in the 2030s, and it's going to take at least 3 years. And, there's a real psychological component. Obviously, the astronauts could just take pills for those 3 years, right?
Yeah.
To get all the nutrients they need.
Yeah,
But
technically true. Yes.
Technically true. But there is a real psychological aspect to needing and wanting fresh food.
Yeah.
And, of different textures and whatnot. So, anyway, that was just a little sidebar. I thought that was really fascinating. But yeah, I mean, when we look at trying to do the most good, I guess, to your point about the foundations, there is a real need to try to pair this real, changeful technology, impactful technology with organizations that have the money to really make the impact, and especially those who have a lot of global connections.
Yep.
And so I do think getting into more family foundations is going to be a critical part of this. Our work with food banks is also really energizing to me.
Yep.
We have, I think, about 7 or 8 customers currently, and my notion prior to working with them was that they were getting a lot of food donated, and come to find out they actually have to buy a lot of it. So they have to use their donations, from different supporters, and actually purchase fresh produce.
Right.
And a lot of it is just what's available. It's not culturally relevant to their population.
Sure.
And so that's been really exciting to see how food banks are being able to use this to have a real consistent, high quality, and culturally relevant array of foods, which, really dignifies the people who are coming to the food banks.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, I want to pull that thread a little bit, because I know we've done, on the Freight Farm side, done work with kind of organizations that are downstream of the food banks sometimes. So like YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, things like that, pandemic and post-pandemic and, the new pandemic world, whatever we want to call that, took on a lot, to serve their community. And a big piece of that was food. And so, curious, what kind of activity are you seeing in there? What are the interesting applications that you've seen or be a part of, or you want to see more in the future?
For nonprofits?
Yeah.
Specifically? Yeah. I mean, we have Lotus House, which is a shining example of a nonprofit. They're basically the largest women's and children's shelter in the U.S. They're down in Florida, Miami, Florida. Okay. And they use the farm not only for the obvious of supplying their dining hall with fresh produce, but they're also providing it as a therapeutic outlet for the moms and kids who most of them have experienced homelessness coming in there, as well as domestic violence. And so I love that aspect of our farm too. So again, it's not just the productive, workhorse of a farm, but it also provides therapy. It's a great environment to be in. It has, rote tasks, which are very calming for different people. So that's, I think, something that's exciting. And yeah, Boys and Girls Clubs, the one especially down in Metro South here in Massachusetts has been a shining example. They have 3 of our farms. They provide work opportunities, and it's great for these kids. In fact, I went and volunteered there a couple months ago and was there with a bunch of middle school girls, and they loved it. They said it's one of the more fun jobs they've ever actually had.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, so following up on that, because I mean, in the BD role, a lot, I've never held a technical BD role in my life, just kind of founded companies and just kept doing that. Yeah. But a lot of that is business development. But a lot of it is understanding and then setting customers up for success. Like understanding, do you have the right expectations?
Yes.
Do you have the right, support systems, infrastructure, what have you? When it comes to installing a piece of hardware, that's pretty straightforward. It's like, do you have enough space? Do you have water? Do you have power? Specs. Bob's your uncle, it gets installed. I'd love sort of under the hood a little bit, as you've qualified a lot of different foundations, institutions, enterprises, who might be listening, might not, or thinking about like, everything you've just said sounds fantastic. Like, how do I think about this? What would you advise them in terms of like, make sure you think about X, Y, and Z, because that's going to be the difference between like getting to that next step towards success versus not.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think our sales team does a fantastic job of making sure people are going in eyes wide open with this, because it's not just a vending machine for lettuce.
Yeah.
So that's something we talk about a lot, and I think the biggest concern when it comes to institutions is the labor piece.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
And we've had conferences this year, working with universities, working with K through 12 schools, and the times that Freight Farms programs have failed on campuses is when it's given to somebody who already has a full-time job.
Yep.
They weren't the decision maker, and all of a sudden it's, hey, head of the science department,
Yeah.
you're now running the freight farm.
Yeah.
And so it's up to them to not only fit it into their existing job, but find, basically a group of volunteers to help run it. So that's why we do really set people up for success, really ensuring that they know what it's going to take. And it's not only the putting the seeds into the grow pods and transplanting and harvesting, it's the maintenance. It really needs to be understood as a piece of technology.
Yep.
So just as you can't just drive a car for 150,000 miles without doing anything to it.
Right.
We need to make sure that they understand the full program. But also, and again, and that's not really a negative. It's really to ensure that it's going to be a high performing program, whether it's at a nonprofit or a for-profit institution.
Yeah. So I guess on that, I'm thinking about, like you said, can't just be dropped in the lap of somebody who already has a full-time job.
Right.
Congratulations, you're now working 120%. But generally speaking, these enterprises don't have farmers sitting around saying, "Hey, give me a farm. I can't wait to work."
Sure.
What's been the most interesting sort of corporate team member turned farmer that you've seen?
Well, it's kind of interesting with Advent Health. It's actually the VP of nursing's son who ended up becoming a farmer. He did have hydroponic experience.
Great.
In a different industry, but he was able to transfer that, and he's now really successful.
Wow.
And while it's ideal for somebody to have farming experience and kind of agriculture experience, obviously it's not necessary. We do provide a lot of support and training here in Boston, but I think that was a really interesting approach. We also do have a loose partnership with Green City Growers here in Boston.
Yep.
So that's a group of people who are basically managing other people's farming enterprises. They already do manage a few freight farms in the Boston area. So we often refer them if they can't find anybody. We have a good job description that we provide our customers. So if they are going to go hire somebody, a lot of it must be very detail oriented. Is ideally passionate about sustainability and agriculture. So, but we're eager to help people find the right person.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. I mean, shout out to Green City Growers. They were a classmate of ours, I think, in Mass Challenge 2012. So, aging the company and myself very dramatically there. But we were super early days. We were both just like, cool plants, yes, awesome, friends, high five. And now it's nice to see like the organizations have grown and found how we can support each other, which is really cool. So on the other side, like similar to that question, international has been a big part. Not surprisingly so, given the constraints of the world and what the technology can do, and partially what we set out to do. On those international applications, I had asked Dave Harris a question of, there was a period of time where it's like, I'd walk into the office and be like, where in the world is Dave Harris? Because he was launching farms all over the world. In the installs you've seen, what was the most intriguing, most interesting, install that you've seen internationally that's in the roster?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say probably a place like the Faroe Islands or Turks and Caicos, where the farm again is solving a real need, which is in the case of Turks and Caicos, it's a non-arable island. And prior to that, this 5-star resort was FedExing in microgreens.
Oh yeah, Dave was mentioning,
Yes, at a very high, actual cost and also a really big sustainability cost. So the fact that they can now grow everything, on the island with very low amount of water is really intriguing to me. And then the Faroe Islands, I think that's a great business. They analyze the price of lettuce in the local markets and realize that they can actually run a super profitable business and supply, again, really healthy, fresh product to that area. But I love that's one of the things I always highlight in my BD work, which is the fact that the farm can be used in such extreme climates. And when people hear that and they see the pictures in the slide deck of one of them is basically looks like a desert, the other one is surrounded by snow, insulating it.
Yep.
They really start to get it.
Yeah.
And Svalbard, Norway, I think is another cool one, right?
Okay.
I mean, it's like the northernmost part, one of the northernmost parts, I think, of the world.
Really?
And so it's like the super northern tip of Svalbard, where I think they only get probably they're only about 2 or 3 months where they can grow anything.
Oh.
And so they have a couple of our farms.
Is that one of
there.
those regions that like it gets dark
Year
round?
It gets dark.
Or like
it gets
24 hours
dark
for a
in
period?
September, and the sun doesn't come up until May.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've always wanted to have already visited that kind of place. I don't know how. Visiting, I'd be like, this might be depressing.
Yeah. Right. Right.
I'm sure the people there are very happy when it is sunny.
Agreed. But I mean, so to this point, too, I mean, there are so many international opportunities that we have yet to even uncover.
Yeah.
So I think the Middle East represents a huge opportunity. It's also important to know beforehand, so what are they growing? What are they eating in certain places around the world? Because they actually don't eat a lot of produce in certain parts of the world.
Yeah.
So
and I mean, you might not know the depth answer to the question, but like, is that an availability thing? Is that a preference thing? Like, is it available to them, but they just don't want it? Or
look, I think the Maldives is a great example. We had a call with several people from the government there, and ultimately their diet is mostly around seafood, and they actually don't incorporate a lot of produce, probably because they haven't been able to grow it.
Right.
But they have a big tourist industry.
Sure.
And the tourists want fresh salads, and so so there is still an opportunity. It just might not be with the local population.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're coming up on time, and so I was curious. I had one question, and kind of it escaped me for a second, so I apologize because I got all excited about the Maldives. I was like, now there's a place I want to go visit. Speaking of tourists, I mean, I think in terms of areas of the world, because I feel like in the, call it 12, 15 years I've been looking at this space developing in the area, controlled environment ag, vertical farming, kind of goes in cycles. And I feel like there's every few years that like all the companies in the space are like announcing Middle East. And then it's like, no, we're going over here, like it's like whack-a-mole of hot spots. Yeah. I guess like, at Freight Farms, it's been relatively consistent, mostly because like we've just kind of been, for the most part, heads down, not getting caught up too much in the hype.
Sure.
And so we have this platform. It's in how many countries? Do you know?
42.
42. Okay. So we're in 42 countries around the world at this point. Is there an area that's kind of like come back to the surface again? Like what's the latest indoor ag hotspot? Because like I'm out of the loop. I'm not getting the calls anymore. So like my feedback loop is lagging. You're real time.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I would say most of our demand today is still in the United States.
Yep. Okay.
And I don't know whether that's just an awareness, thing that just we're known more here. And honestly, even though we only make up 4% of the global population, there is still so much opportunity for us here in this country. For example, we're in about 40 colleges and universities. There are over 4,000 colleges and universities here. Same with K through 12 schools, 128,000 of them. We're in about 40 of them. So that's not to say we're not focusing on international. We also only came out with our international model, which is the 60 hertz this summer. I'm sorry, 50 hertz, which is this past summer. So really, I think we're going to be increasing our work. And we get inbound leads from all over the world. And I couldn't tell you where specifically, maybe the hot pockets are.
Yeah, okay.
But, I think Europe, for many reasons, is very interested. And especially just given, I think, the sustainability push. So I would imagine that's probably where most of the leads are coming from.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, interesting. I just wanted to get the real ear on the ground kind of perspective on where things are happening. So, Alison, this was fantastic. Thanks for taking time and joining us.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
just to kind of cap this off, I think with the conversation with Dave earlier, you kind of had a little bit of a call to action. So I guess I wanted to give you the opportunity, especially as the BD person at Freight Farms, right? What would be your call to action to someone watching who maybe wants to engage with Freight Farms or understand more about all the offerings that you have?
Yeah, I would say please get in touch. And we love to give people tours of our farms. That's honestly, it's like the proof is in the pudding.
Yep.
And so we welcome anyone who's in the Boston area to come and look at our farm at our headquarters. However, we also have farms in all 50 states, U.S. states, and so we're really happy to try to set up any connections that we have with existing customers who are willing to give tours of the farm. But yeah, it's a fantastic tool that can really solve so many problems, and we're really happy to kind of help people understand how we can do that with their specific agendas.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Really fun day here at Freight Farms, in their retail space, being able to record the podcast here. I think it's one of those things where I was really excited to be able to get into the working location, right, of Freight Farms, get out of the dingy WeWork and actually to a place where really fun hardware gets done, right? And so, we had some really great conversations, both with Dave and Alison, talking about, the different work that they're doing. But ultimately, the thing that really impressed me here at Freight Farms, and obviously something that Brad has impressed upon the company, is a really customer-centric kind of focus here at the company, right? That they were excited hearing that, customer needs were being met, whether it's in the Faroe Islands or, over to the Middle East and everywhere in between, right? Really, what really excited them was that people's problems were getting solved, which is the kind of quintessential, if you boil startups down, everything down to, its spokes, is really just building things that people want. And, right? Yeah. And so, really excited to have those conversations, and, having you here as a co-host, and,
it was a fantastic day, fantastic episode. I think to your point, it was somewhat surreal, honestly, to be here in the Freight Farms HQ that I had envisioned, back in 2010, 2011, 2012, but equally surreal to have those conversations with Dave and Alison. And I think for me, in the company I'm currently building now on the Morrissey side, to your point, is reflecting back a little bit through those conversations on what worked, what didn't, because the journey was not perfect, and it's still not a perfect entity here at Freight Farms, but what did work and what didn't work, we thrived, we survived, we scaled, we grew because of exactly that, being when we had true focus on customer and solving problem, then everything else just seemed to work. Right. When I think back and reflecting on war stories with Dave and things like that, when we lost that here and there, which you will, is when the company itself started to come off the rails a little bit. And I reflect back on those times. Necessary journey, but I think overall, really exciting, really fun, really, really great to be here, and get it right from the kind of no offense to them, the horse's mouth, where at the end of the day, you start a company, it's you, maybe one or two other people, you're in a single room, you're in a garage, you're in a parking lot, whatnot, and your goal, I imagine, and my goal always was, to build an entity that would survive, thrive, and inspire really smart, motivated people to continue to do better work than you probably ever could have done on your own, and continue to put that out in the world. And again, don't reflect on my journey often, to say the least. It's always what's next. But here was a nice episode, a good day to spend at a company I founded, with technology I invented, that is progressing farther beyond what I would have ever been able to do on my own, or even with a small team, without putting in the work, having the years, and getting a great group of humans together.
And I think you should be proud. I mean, I've seen a lot of different companies. I've been to a lot of different places, right? And I think that what I've seen today was really impressive, right?
Thank you.
What the founder, and being able to put into a startup, the culture, how company, how many employees take off after that point, right? I think is something that's really important. So I really hope to be able to do this with Morrissey Market soon. We're going to be doing that, but. Do stay tuned, subscribe, like this video, share it with other people who might be relevant. We've had some different call to actions with some of the individual folks, and so, please engage, feel free with Brad, myself, or the different people who were on the podcast here. And so this wraps up episode 4. And so thank you so much for watching, and until next time, thank you.
Thanks a lot.